Morning everybody, hope everybody's well. I'm just going to do a little video this morning to talk about feeling stuck in a rut. So I've had quite a lot of contact from people over the last week or so who have been telling me that they've been just feeling like they're stuck in a rut and they don't know how to kind of break out of it. So what I thought I would do today was to explain a model to you to help you to understand what it is that you're experiencing when you are kind of feeling like you're stuck in this rut. So, the first thing with overcoming any sort of problem or difficulty is to fully understand what it is that's happening and why you might be feeling the way that you are. So, quite often, we might say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling upset, all those emotions. There's also other aspects that go with that as well. So it's important for us to understand that and to be able to make sense of it. So, what I'm going to talk you through is a model called the ABCE model of emotion. And this is a model that I use to help people to understand that vicious cycle that they might get stuck in, particularly at times like now. It's quite common. So this is a cycle that you can use for anything. So you can use it for any sort of problem. So whether it's stress, anxiety, low mood, depression, whatever it might be, if you're experiencing any sort of kind of negative emotion, you can use this cycle just to try and help yourself to make sense of it. So if you can personalize something, it can be really empowering to help you to move forwards. So this model is based on the cognitive behavioral therapy framework, so CBT for short. Many of you might have heard of that. It's very popular kind of therapy. Basically, it just means, in short, that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviours are all closely connected. So that's what this model is going to look at. So the model is made up of four components: the A, B, C, and the E. So the A stands for autonomic. So that's your autonomic symptoms. And that's just a fancy word for physical symptoms or how you might be feeling. So things like feeling low in your mood, feeling sluggish, feeling lethargic, feeling irritable, like got no energy, no motivation, all those physical sensations that you might be experiencing right now. The next area is the B, so that stands for behaviour. So the way that you behave when you're feeling like this. So usually it's that things have slowed down in that area or stopped altogether. So quite often what people tell me and what we find is that they do things like stop seeing friends, stop exercising, stop taking care of themselves. So they might stop kind of getting dressed in the day, just hanging around in the pajamas, for example, not making an effort, not doing hobbies or interests, all those kind of things. And again, it's quite common, particularly at the minute, for those things to have stopped. So we can't go to the gym, for example. We can't go to places we might normally go to socialise with friends. So it's really important just to think about, in terms of behaviour, what things might have changed for you, and have you stopped doing anything in particular that you might have normally have done. Also, just to be mindful, you might have started doing other things in that area to try and cope. So, behaviourally, you might have started drinking, for example, or taking drugs. So, again, these are quite common things that sometimes people turn to because they don't know how to cope. But those are really unhelpful kind of coping mechanisms, and it's really important to be mindful of those and just to identify them if that is something that you've been relying on to try and cope. So in terms of the behavioural component, have a think about what might have stopped, anything that might have changed, but then also anything that you might have done to try and help yourself as well that might be a change in your behaviour. The next area to think about is your the C, so that's cognitions. So again, just a fancy name for the way that you think. And again, lots of thoughts that people might be having at the minute, things like this is awful, what's the point, there's no point in getting dressed, there's no point doing anything, I'm a failure, I'm a rubbish mum, all those kind of things, very kind of negative and quite catastrophic thinking styles, and often we get stuck in that very negative way of thinking. And then what happens is that forms a vicious circle. So you can see the A, the B, and the C are really closely connected. So if we feel low in our mood, we feel really sluggish, we feel really lethargic, like we can't be bothered, we've got no energy, that in turn impacts on the way that we behave. So behaviourally then our response is to not do anything, to shut ourselves away, stop doing the things that we might normally do that we would usually enjoy, for example, stop doing any physical activity because we've got no energy, no motivation. In turn, then that behavioural response has a direct impact on the way that we think. So because we're not getting the physical stimulation, the mental stimulation, the challenge, stretching ourselves, all those things that we need to be a mentally healthy human being, if we're not getting those things, that has a direct impact on the way that we think. So we then start to think, I'm a waste of space. What's the point anyway? There's no point. I can't be bothered. I might as well just lie here in bed. Nobody cares anyway. I'm not going to see anybody. And then, as I said in my last video, if you watch that, our thought processes are really closely connected to our physiological system. So the more that we think like that, the more that's going to cause us to experience a physical sensation in relation to that. So the more that we think like that, the more our mood dips even lower, and we feel even more tired, more lethargic, and more sluggish, and we just get stuck in that vicious circle. So hopefully you can see the A, the B, and the C are all really closely connected, and it's a vicious circle that just goes round and round and round. And all the time, we've also got another area, the E, which is the environment, of things that are kind of pressing down on that cycle and causing extra stresses. So it's important to identify those as well. So those might be things like, at the minute particularly, the corona pandemic. Obviously that's something that's happening in our environment and that will affect all those different areas of our lives. And then also other things, and things that might come out of that or might be separate from that. So things like financial issues, family concerns, relationship issues, all those kind of things are going on in the environment all the time. Those things are pressing down on that vicious cycle and impacting on that as well. So we need to identify those 4 different areas. Once we've done that, that's really quite powerful because, as I say, one of the first steps in overcoming any sort of issue is to personalise it to yourself so that you can make sense of it. So what I would encourage everybody to do is to have a think, draw out 4 different circles, A, B, C and the E. I've got a diagram that I've done myself, so I'll show you that shortly. Hopefully it'll make it a bit clearer. But draw out your own vicious cycle. Think about those different areas, so your physical symptoms, those physical sensations you might be experiencing. Think about how you're feeling. And think about your behaviours in response to that. Have you noticed any changes recently, particularly anything that you've stopped doing or that slowed down recently for you? And then think about any thoughts and how your thinking has been recently and write down those specific thoughts. And then also think about in your environment, is there anything going on in your environment that is kind of impacting on all of those areas? Once you've done that, you will quickly see, and the positive in that is that it is a very cyclical process. So as I've said, the A affects the B, B affects the C, C affects the A, and it's a very cyclical process, and it goes the other way as well. And that's why people feel stuck in a rut. So hopefully if you go through that process, you can identify then and think, yeah, actually, that's why I'm kind of feeling that way. I can see that vicious cycle then. And that in itself, as I say, can be really powerful because you've taken the first step, you've personalised it and you're starting to understand it. And then the important thing to do is to think about, well, how can I break out of this cycle now? So it's all right to identify it, but how do you break out of it? So we need to think about the different areas, and there's things that you can do in each of those areas. So we can do things in the A, for example, things like taking medication. However, that wouldn't be recommended as a first line treatment really. We wouldn't recommend that. So if this is a recent thing that you've been experiencing, it could just be because of the current situation. So wouldn't recommend that as a first line option. However, if you are really struggling, we would always say do speak to your GP because sometimes people do need medication. So for example, if it's low mood that you're struggling with, you might need an antidepressant just to lift your mood slightly so you can look at the other areas of your cycle. If it's anxiety, for example, or severe stress, you might need an anxiolytic medication that can just settle things for you again so that you can look at the other areas. But we wouldn't really routinely recommend that as a first line option. What you can do is learn to challenge your thoughts. So when we feel like this, our thoughts, as we've said, tend to be very negative, very catastrophic. However, it can be quite a difficult process. So again, I did talk about this in one of my last videos. So if you're interested, have a look. However, if you're stuck in this cycle at the minute, it can be quite difficult to challenge your thoughts. It's a very powerful process, and I would recommend that you have a look at it and do try and think about it, but wouldn't always recommend it as a kind of first line option. The easiest place to make some changes and just things that just take small steps is in the behavioural component. So you can make some quite small changes that have quite a significant impact. So you can think about in terms of your behaviour, those things that you've stopped doing, and think about how you can start to rebuild those back up again. So for example, if you've stopped exercising, think about how you're going to build that back up again. And again, it doesn't have to be anything too overwhelming. Break it down, set yourselves goals on a daily basis. So it might be, I'm going to go for a walk for 15 minutes every day. That will make you feel better. So you're getting the physical stimulation that you need. And it might be things like you've stopped seeing a friend. So you might set yourself the goal of, I'm going to ring a friend 3 times a week. Again, whatever it might be, make it realistic to you, but really break it down into something that you can do and that is realistic. But just think about all those things that you've stopped doing and how they would normally give you that social interaction, that challenge, that stimulation, that sense of purpose, sense of achievement, all those things that we need to be a healthy human being. So if you start to build those things up, you can see then how powerful that will be, because if you start to change your behaviour, you saw how that cycle was very closely connected. So it will start to break the cycle at that point. So if you start to make some changes behaviourally, it will have a positive impact on the way that you think. So you will start to think more positively. You will start to think, actually, yeah, there is point. I can achieve these things. I'm proud of myself today because I've been for a walk, or I enjoyed speaking to my friend today. Those kind of things. Your thinking becomes much more kind of balanced and positive. And again, as a result of that, you're getting the physical stimulation, all those things that we need. And as a direct impact, that lifts your mood, makes you feel better. You have more energy, more motivation, and makes you feel like you want to do more. So again, has a direct impact behaviourally. So just have a think about that. Draw out your own cycle and really think about, in the behavioural area, what is it that I've stopped doing? What's kind of slowed down, and how can I build that back up? And then just try and monitor and think about and notice how that has then impacts on those other areas. Also, what I encourage you to do is to think about the environment as well. So quite often we spend a lot of time dwelling on things that we don't have control over. So think about, in your environment, what is going on, and are there any things that you've identified there that you have got control over and you can start to kind of tackle, really. And if you can, do some practical problem solving. That will make a massive difference as well. So as I said before, one of the things that you might identify at the minute might be coronavirus. Unfortunately, we haven't got much control over it. There's nothing that we can do. But actually, there might be other things coming out of that are causing us extra stress, extra worry, and that we can take some control over. So things like financial worries. So can you get in touch with your mortgage advisor, for example? Think about a mortgage break, if that will help. Can you get in touch with your credit card companies, see if they can offer support? There's lots of things practically that you can do. So make a list, separate out those things that you have got some control over and those that you haven't, and concentrate on the things that you have got control over. And as I say, do some practical problem solving. What is it that you can do? And really try and work through some of those. And again, that will make a massive difference. So I'm just going to share with you my model. So Might be difficult to see on the screen here, but I'll do my best. So this is my ABC E-model emotion, just to try and make it a little bit clearer to you. So as you can see there, we've got the A. So they're the autonomic symptoms, so the physical symptoms. Things, as I said, like low mood, feeling sluggish, lethargic and tired. And then that has a direct impact on the behavioural aspect of things. So we have avoid people, stop exercising, not cooking, for example, just shoving processed foods in the oven, not cooking from scratch and making meals like I might normally do. Not wanting to see friends, as I've said, and just generally avoiding people, and not kind of making myself up might be one of them. So again, often we find that when people are feeling like this, they just hang around in the pajamas and don't kind of make themselves up, and again, that doesn't do us any good either. So the way that we feel there in that A has a direct impact on the B and how we behave. That then has a direct impact on C. So because we're behaving like that and we're feeling like that, we start to think things like, I can't be bothered, what's the point, I'm a failure. And then, as we've said before, because our physiological system's closely connected to our thought processes, that then directly impacts back on the A again, causes our mood to dip even further. We feel even more sluggish, tired, lethargic. And as you can see, we just keep going round in a circle, and it goes the other way as well. And very quickly, people get stuck in that vicious circle. And then you can see there as well, the E. So those are the things, as I said, that are pressing down. So things like money worries, job worries, those kind of things. So those things then are directly kind of always impacting on that cycle as well. So as I've said, we can intervene in any of those areas, and because it is so cyclical, you can see that it will have an impact and break that cycle. So we can break it at any point, and there are lots of things in the different areas that we can do. But what I would encourage people to do initially is to start on this behavioural component. As I say, just to think about what it is that you might have stopped doing, you're not doing as much of, and how you can start to build that up. So if we look at mine here, for example, one of the things I identified was avoiding people. So I said I was going to ring a friend. So I might ring a friend 3 times a week. I might set that as my goal. I've stopped exercising. So I said I was going to go for a walk. And again, might make my goal to go for a walk every day for the next week. And in terms of my environment, the money worries was something that I thought I could start to tackle. So I did some practical problem solving, as I've said earlier, like contact the mortgage companies, credit card companies, to see if they can offer some support. And again, that just takes the pressure off yourself. And hopefully you can see from that cycle that breaking it, as I say, at one point will directly impact on the other areas. So we don't always have to focus on every area. Sometimes it's enough just to make changes in one area, and the behavioural component is the easiest place to make those changes. So I would suggest have a go at drawing out your own cycle. Get a piece of paper, really think about how it is you're feeling, what changes you might have noticed in your behaviour. You can ask other people as well. So if you've got a partner, for example, or a friend, sometimes it's really helpful for them to input into it as well, because they might have noticed things that you've not noticed. Not always the best at identifying things ourselves. Think about what it is that's going through your mind, and just kind of transfer that all onto paper, so you've got your own personalised vicious cycle of emotion. And then, as I say, that in itself is very powerful. Once you've done that, have a go at thinking, how can I break this cycle? What changes can I make in that behavioural component and in terms of the environment, because they're the easiest places to intervene. Okay, so have a go, see how you get on. As always, if you've got any questions, just email them through to us, give us a call, or you can comment below the video. All right, good luck everyone. Bye.